Hello, I'm Karen Thomas, and welcome to this edition of the Block Gallery Interviews. The Block Gallery is celebrating 30 years in 2014, and SurfaceMatters kicks off this exciting year of exhibitions with an opening on February 6th at the Block Gallery. SurfaceMatters features artwork by Cindy Moorfield, Joyce Watkins King, and Stacy Bloom Rexroad. We'll also be talking with artist Ross Ford, whose work is featured in the first of a year-long series at the Block Gallery titled Case Study, a new initiative that provides a public platform for installation artists. By appealing to our desire for touch through highly textured surfaces, the artists of SurfaceMatters create a heightened sensory experience for the viewer. Using additive and subtractive techniques, Cindy Moorfield creates visually exciting images that encourage interaction through her modular concept. Joyce Watkins King's hybrid structures utilize surprising materials to create organic compositions and texturally rich surfaces. And Stacy Bloom Rexroad's mixed media paintings challenge the distinction between high art and craft. Case Study presents an installation of iterative drawings by artist Ross Ford. Characterized by the use of rhythmic line and repetition, Ford's work captures emotive experience through the recordings of subtle variation. Now, here to talk more about her work is Cindy Moorfield. I want to thank you for being the first for the 2014 series of Block Gallery Interviews. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be here.
Now, tell us a little bit about yourself. Before we got started, you said that you have traveled and visited every state in the Union. Wow.
I have. I've traveled some, a little bit out of the country, but I have managed to visit every state in the United States.
Not putting you on the spot, which is your favorite?
Oh, it's really hard to say. I love mountains. So pretty much any state that has mountains in it, that's pretty happy for me.
Well then, you should be very happy here in North Carolina because we have beautiful mountains.
We do. I wish they were a little closer to Raleigh, but that's good. It's close enough.
Raleigh's in the middle of the coast.
That's right.
And the mountains.
So easily get to one or the other.
That's right.
It's
and
good.
The time, you don't have to hop on a plane.
That's right.
Just get in your car.
Drive a couple hours and you're good.
Well, we talked about your educational background. So for those who may be new to you and your art, tell us a little bit about how you got started.
Well, I've been making art really as long as I can remember. It's something I've done ever since I was a child, and my parents really encouraged me and supported me in that. I decided to major in art when I was in college and undergraduate. I was one of the few people I knew who never changed my major in college. I started out as an art major, and that's what I did. And then I went on to graduate school to further study painting. So that's kind of my trajectory of how I've gotten here.
So from childhood, what appealed to you most about art?
Well, I enjoyed drawing and just found that to be something fun to do. I never was much of a doodler, but I was very much drawn to very intricate processes. I didn't realize that at the time, but recently, after seeing the pattern in my recent work of very intricate, time-consuming processes, I went and looked back at some of my work that I've done as when I was younger and see that theme has continued to be there, that I was doing little tiny, you cut out paper snowflakes. I used to do these really, really intricate ones made out of tissue paper that you had to cut out with cuticle scissors. I mean, so I love to do that kind of really, and realistic drawing. I worked very realistically early on when I was younger and through undergraduate, but that's also a very meticulous process to create sort of photorealistic drawings or paintings. So even though I don't work realistically now, I still do that same kind of meticulous kind of work.
So then let's talk about your artwork in this exhibition, SurfaceMatters. I think a lot of times individuals are really interested in what experience the artist brings and what is the process for creating, say for example, reticulation.
Yes. When I was in graduate school, I was still working in a more realistic format and in oil painting. But I began scratching into like turning my brush around and scratching into the surface of the oil paint. And if anyone who's familiar at all with oil paint, it stays wet for a while, so it's easy to scratch into it. And as I was doing that, I found myself really interested in that texture. So I started actually exploring the texture. I became more interested in the texture of the paint than I did in the subject matter that I was painting. So I explored that some in oil paint, and then I switched to acrylic paint to explore that more, because acrylic dries more quickly, and I started doing more heavily layered paintings, and which really I needed acrylic to be able to do that, and that's also when I started working on wood panel as opposed to canvas, because I could really do some pretty heavy-duty techniques to the surface. I could carve it or scratch into it or sand it, or things that were a lot harder to do on canvas. So that's kind of how this process started. And that's very much a similar process that I used for the pieces that are in this show. There are some developments since then. I began using metal leaf, which is in most of the pieces in the show. I do still like I love shiny, reflective things. So even when I did realistic work, I like to do drawings and paintings of glass, very reflective, or of metal, the objects. And now I use actual metal in my paintings. So I started doing that after I had attended a workshop in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I had studied a Japanese painting technique called Nihongo, which uses a lot mineral pigments, but also silver leaf. So that's when I first learned how to do that, and then I started incorporating it into my work. And basically the process for these paintings is I put a lot of thick layers of paint on initially. There are many 6 to 8 preparatory layers before I start even doing anything. And then I add paint, I spatter it, I spackle it on. I don't use brushes very much.
Okay.
I spatter on paint or spackle it on, or use things to stamp the paint on in different designs. And then I'll sand it off, and then I'll put more on, and then I'll sand it off. So I put it on, take it off, put it on. I actually spend a lot more time taking paint off than I do putting it on, because it takes more time to sand it.
I imagine it does.
So that's basically the main process for all of these pieces. And then I'll add in elements like the metal leaf, or in some of the pieces where they have holes drilled into the surface. So I do a lot with the surface and the texture.
How does your artwork then fit into the theme Surface Matters? You put it on, you take it off, you're scratching, you're adding metal, you're adding glass, things that shiny things. So how does your artwork fit into the theme of this exhibition?
Well, surface is very important in my work. One of the things I'm working to do is to build a very rich surface, and that reads visually, but it's also very tactile. And there are places that are really smooth, there are places that are very rough and carved, there's places that are bumpy and places that are not. So there's a lot of variation in the texture. There are places that are shiny, places that are matte, so there's contrast in sheen, there's contrast in texture. I like them to be very rich in that way.
Now, you know, we were talking also earlier about the concept of modular. How do you create your pieces so that they fit together, and do they fit in such a way that they can fit this way and they can fit that way? I can add, I can take that whole concept, of the idea that your work is additive and subtractive at the same time. Right,
yes, it's additive, basically very much additive and subtractive in technique. And the Reservoir series, which I have, there's a big chunk of it in the show, is the modular series. And it is, all the pieces are square. They don't have a top or a bottom, so you can hang them in any orientation, and they are made to connect with each other. Really, at least 2 pieces work together as a set, but it can be any of the pieces in the series. There are 12 larger pieces and 12 smaller pieces, and they can be grouped in lots of different ways to where different elements will combined. So maybe the drilled holes will connect with each other to make circles or curves, or the big carved arcs will connect with each other, or the rectangular sort of window pane elements. So depending on which way you turn them, different things connect with each other. So I just thought it would be really interesting for people to be able to change, not only in a gallery setting for curators to be able to come up with all different kinds of ways to hang the work, but also if you have it in your home and you have a grouping of 3 or 4 pieces, you can change it around. It's not always the same painting.
Are there motifs that are woven throughout your pieces when you are creating and adding and taking away?
Yes.
Spackling and scratching?
Yes. Yes, I found, in fact, that was part of the genesis, in addition to wanting to do a modular series. The title of the work, Reservoir, comes from my interest in, I'd begun recognizing certain motifs and things in my work that show up over and over again. So I thought I would intentionally dip into that reservoir and pull out some representative motifs and techniques and use them in a very in a little more intentional way. So all of the pieces in the Reservoir series have the same 6 foundational techniques in them. They're just in a different order. They're in different layers in the pieces, but they're in a certain order. And so that I really picked out from these motifs. So some of them are, I really like circles. Anybody who looks at my work, you'll see a lot of circles and dots and lots of circles and lots of forms. I like the window pane motif is something that's been showing up in my work since about 2003 or 4. Then the metal leaf, fragment images, there's fragmented forms that show up, and then they're kind of a corollary to sort of tree branch forms, which depending on, those two go together, because when I make the tree branch forms, then they tend to have the negative space tends to be these fragmented forms. So depending on which way you look at it, they're fragments or they're branches or whatever.
Now, I picked up something that you said, and I think since I've been doing these interviews, what I've learned is that an artist, and hopefully all of us, continue to develop whatever it is we're doing. And I've listened to you and you say, I started this way, then I noticed this emerging from my work, and then I took off and I started going this way, and I found that, it was like you started with oil and then you went to acrylic. So how often do you think you actually see perhaps a theme or a change in your artwork developing?
It's interesting because I think it happens all the time. I mean, to me, the thing that inspires me and gives me new ideas for the next things I want to do is the work itself. So I'm doing paintings and I discover something, or like the way the technique is working over here, and it gives me an idea. I'm like, oh, I want to explore that some other way, not in this painting, but that'll be in the next thing. So I'm always getting ideas from my work, and it doesn't always make these big sea changes, like going from realistic to abstract or oil to acrylic, but even throughout the work as I look at it over the years, I can really see the thread of the kind of things I'm interested in that stay the same, and yet the techniques and the way that I present it changes, because you learn things and you get interested in other things and you go off and explore them, but somehow those motifs just keep coming back up. So they must be part of my psyche or something.
From the time you were making the little tissue,
yes, little tiny things.
Snowflakes. I can't imagine that. That's very intricate.
Yes.
Because of this exhibit, Surface Matters, what are you hoping that viewers will take away from the exhibit, and what piece would you say may be your favorite in this particular exhibit? I'm sure you have lots of favorites, but in this particular exhibit.
Boy, that's really hard to say. Part of it is it will depend on how it's hung, so I have to wait and see, because I'm always excited, especially with the Reservoir pieces, to see how somebody hangs them, because sometimes that shows me new things that I haven't seen before. I have to say, though, there's one actual earlier piece in the show, a large piece called Connections, that I'm very I don't know if I want to say it's my favorite, but I'm very happy to have it in this exhibit because it's a very large piece there. I haven't had a lot of good venues to put it in. I think the Block Gallery is going to be a great place for it, and so I'm really excited to have that piece exhibited because I haven't been able to exhibit it as much as some of the smaller work. So
great. Well, where else can people see your work?
Well, I just started a new venture this year. I have some display space at the 311 Martin Street Studios.
Right across the street.
Right across the street.
I can just go right
That's right.
over
You can
and
walk right
see
over
your
there.
work anytime.
That's right.
That's super.
And so I'll be work there. We're in Studio 15 in the back. And I have exhibited work at Visual Art Exchange. And I'll also have some work up later in the year at Wake Med in Cary, and then at Morning Times in August. So they'll be around
really
in the area.
You are around in the area, so
Yes.
anyone can just see your artwork in these public spaces anytime. That is really terrific.
Right. And I have a website, which is cynthiamorfield.com. And you can see my work on my website, and you can send me a contact through my website if you'd like to visit my studio. I'm always happy to show people my work. So.
Great. Well, I thank you for sharing your time with us today. I look forward to the exhibit, and I look forward to all of your wonderful pieces, including Reservoir, and learning more about Cindy Moorfield. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Stay tuned. There's lots more to come.
Going out like that?
Yeah, why?
Well, what would the neighbors think?
I see you! Come look at Mr. Feather.
Look what I have.
Mr. Bird, remember? Bark, bark, bark. We're just playing. We're just playing on trying to get you out of here.
Even still.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
Hi, and welcome back to Block Gallery Interviews. This is a 2014 series, and let me tell you, we have some wonderful artists lined up for this new exhibition, Surface Matters. With me now to talk about her installation is Joyce Watkins King. And earlier, when we were chatting, I said, you have such an extensive resume. I'm just going to let you tell our viewers about you and all the wonderful things you've done. And of course, we also found out that we are alum from NC State University. Yay.
In the same class.
Same class. And she also did a wolf. I know everyone remembers the wonderful wolf ramble. That was such a big thing. How many wolves were actually created?
Oh, goodness. I think it was close to 100.
Yeah,
I did Sir Wolfter Raleigh.
You did Sir Wolf. I've seen Sir Wolfter Raleigh. Okay, great. So a lot of work has been done by this lady. So let's just talk about a little bit about your background, because people always want to know about the artists and how they got started from childhood development of doodling to paper cutouts.
Well, I'm a North Carolina girl, born and raised in Oxford, North Carolina.
Know where that is?
Hour from here. And I think I was just born to be an artist. When I was in Sunday school, my Sunday school teacher noticed some skill. She was an artist and approached my parents and said, I think she needs to have art lessons. I see some spark there. So I started taking art lessons at age 4. So it's been a part of my life, you know, as long as I can remember. And I grew up with a very creative mom. She was a seamstress, and my grandmother was also an amazing seamstress. And I loved watching them. She sewed not only for herself, but a lot of women in the neighborhood. So I spent many Saturdays at Belt Leggett in Oxford, and picking out fabrics and patterns and matching things. So I have this sort of rich history and really wonderful memories about textiles and design, and I really think that combination of art and textiles stuck with me, and when I decided, or was deciding what to study in school, I decided on design. So I went to the School of Design at NC State, and I did a minor in textiles. And then my very first job out of school was designing fabric for some of the major North Carolina furniture manufacturers, like Henry Don and Thayer Colgan and Century. And I actually started working designing fabric before I graduated from school. And my lifelong dream at that point was to have something in Architectural Digest magazine. And lo and behold, before I even graduated, one of my fabrics made it on the inside cover of Architectural Digest. Wow. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to be my new dream?
That's great.
So I did that for a few years, and then I got married, had children, and was doing more practical things. I was doing graphic design, which was my main major. And then when I was in my 30s, my job was Director of Development for the Visual and Performing Arts at NC State. And I had an opportunity to take the children in the Scholars Program, I'll call them children, they were 18, 19, 20, and to the Summer in Oxford program in Oxford, England. And I had the good fortune to be able to sit in on some of the classes. And the chief curator from the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford taught one of the classes, the history of European art. And he was still using the old glass lantern slides, believe it or not, you know, the ones that slide through one at the time. But I just fell in love with art all over again. Hearing those lectures and being able to go to the Ashmolean Museum, which is just a few blocks away, and taking the students into London to the museums, it rekindled my interest in making art again. So when I got home, I bought myself a little set of acrylic paints and a canvas, and didn't even have an easel. I sat down in front of the fireplace and started painting. And I haven't stopped making art since then.
Sounds like you came full circle.
I did.
And I think sometimes that happens. We know maybe growing up or through our childhood intuitively what we want to be, what we like to be, what we aspire to be. Some of that is mentoring from someone that sees something in us. And so you just came full circle with all of that.
Yes.
So tell us about, before we talk about the beautiful piece that caught my eye when I was looking through the slides, tell us about your installation and the process for designing that installation for this exhibition.
Okay. I started this body of work about 3.5 years ago now. And like you said, things come full circle. As I grew in my artwork, I was doing very representational work at first. And then I took a class at the Penland School with Clarence Morgan, who I had always wanted to take a class with. He was the former director of art at ECU, and he's now in Minneapolis. And that was doing more abstract work. And it was the first time I'd really done abstract work, and I just got so excited about that. Then I started doing more collage work incorporated with the paint. The next step, I started adding encaustic to my work. I was getting looser and looser, more abstract, more abstract. And eventually I started adding some textiles into my work. Not as a whole, but little bits of textiles. Maybe some thread or some cheesecloth or some burlap. And somehow that migrated into putting some stockings in with my encaustic work. And I've always had this love of texture and textiles, so it was sort of a natural progression. And then when I did a residency at the Vermont Studio Center, I was doing my more typical work, the encaustic work with just a little bit of textiles, and sort of as a little gift to myself in between doing some of these larger works, I started playing around with the stockings. And just small pieces, 12 by 12 pieces, just sort of as a little gift for finishing a big piece. And when the first visiting artist came in, we had a different major professional artist each week. When the first one came in, I had 1 hour with him to talk about anything I wanted to. And he looked at the work that I'd done and said, you know, this is very accomplished, it's very balanced, you have a great sense of color, and I can't really tell you much about this. It looks like you've kind of mastered that. And then he looked down, and I had these 3 or 4 little pieces along with 4 that were these textile pieces, and he went, "What's that?" And I was like, "I'm not sure what that is. I'm just playing. I'm just having fun with it." And he went, "That stuff is really good.
Hey.
You need to focus on that. You know, think about taking a new direction." So, like you said, you know, if he hadn't said that to me, it probably would have just been an aside. So I took it and ran with it. And for the rest of the month that I was there, I really focused on working more with the stockings and other textiles. And I just fell in love with it. And the next 3 artists that came, the visiting artists, all got very excited about it and also encouraged me to take that direction in my work.
So it sounds like you've come full circle, but you're still growing and experimenting.
Absolutely.
And Cindy talked a lot about that too, just the process of even personal self-development as an artist, how you look at something and you go back and you retool it, or it takes another form. It doesn't change a whole lot, but then it takes another form, or it just goes to another level.
Exactly.
Now, you recently attended the residency in Cambridge Center, that's the one we're talking about,
Right.
and your whole experience
That
from
was
that.
just this past year in September.
So you did a tribute.
I did.
Yeah.
Right.
Explain that, because I looked at that piece of artwork and I wanted to know, what were you thinking of with that piece, with that particular piece of artwork? What are you conveying to what do you want to convey to the audience?
Right. Well, let me just say a little bit about the Hargett Center.
Yes.
It's another very old artist residency program in the U.S. It's in North Georgia. And what it's special about it, it's in a temperate forest, and it's a 600-acre property. It's just beautiful. You're surrounded by wildlife, and they only take 8 or 9 artists every month. And I had my own little, it wasn't even a cabin, it was like a 2-story house with my artist studio connected to the living quarters. And in a way, you're very isolated, which is the whole purpose, is to give you this very, very focused
Sounds
time
serene.
when you think about nothing but your art, but you're sitting in this beautiful environment. I could look out my window and see nothing but forest and meadow, you know, and you wake up to the sound of the chirping birds and the grasshoppers, and it's just amazing. So it's a wonderful opportunity to really focus on your work. And I was only there for 2 weeks, but in 2 weeks I probably made about 12 large pieces and a number of small pieces. And the really cool thing is that Miriam, who founded the center, was herself a textile artist. Okay. And she came to it later in life. In her early career, believe it or not, she was in vaudeville, and she was a professional whistler.
That sounds exciting.
This woman, she was very progressive, really ahead of her time. And she found this property and fell in love with it and decided she wanted to make it an artist's retreat. And it has now grown into a residency program. But one of her loves was textiles. And much like Lucy Morgan, who founded the Penland School, in North Carolina, after she learned how to weave, she traveled all over the world learning weaving techniques from different cultures. She came back to this small town and taught the local women how to weave. And these might have been single women or women that didn't have good ways to make an income. So she gave them a way to create and to have an income. And they didn't make just any fabrics. They made the best of the best. She imported yarns. They only worked with natural fibers, silk and wool and linen and cotton. They did their own dyeing there, and the fabrics were so fine they really couldn't sell them locally. So they had showrooms in New York where they sold these fabrics. And the thing that really stuck with me was her color palette. All of the fabrics were in these beautiful sort of jewel tones, but they were still soft, they were still kind of subtle at the same time. So one of the pieces I did was a tribute to her, and I really focused on using her color palette, much like this kind of tone. It's a jewel tone, but it's still soft. Purples and soft burgundies, and actually this is the piece right here.
That's the piece right there.
And gold tones. So it was a nice way for me to remember that experience, to do the tribute to her.
Well, you know, as I sit here and listen to you, I'm inspired that you have continued to learn and develop and to discover your art. I noticed that you also have in your artwork, for example, the hybrid structures, the grid, much like the tribute to Mary. What is it about incorporating that in your artwork that you do?
That's been something that has been with me for a long time, and I don't know where that love of the square came from, but if I look at my whole body of work over time, I'd say about 90% of it, even when I was painting, is square. I just love that form. And it's very useful for what I'm doing now, because if you think about the size of a stocking, even if I get the queen XXX, largest thing I can get, about as far as I can stretch it is 18 inches, and a lot of them will only stretch about 12 inches. So a square is actually a good form for my material, but it also lends itself to making larger work by creating things modularly. So sometimes I'll just create a lot of 12 by 12s or 18 by 18s and then pull them together to make larger works, not knowing when I originally make them how they're going to fit together with other pieces. So I have a lot of fun creating the larger compositions from the smaller pieces. But then sometimes I'll start envisioning the larger work and figuring out how I'm going to make the parts and put it together. So I kind of work at it both ways.
That's amazing. What you're sharing with me is so similar to what Cindy and I talked about, is making those modular pieces, using form. She does a lot with circles and lines and dots and things, and you with squares and grids. And then how you start with one piece, and then you create another piece, and how those pieces connect. When you're thinking about your modular pieces, what is the message that you want the viewer to walk away with? For example, what inspired you to create this piece, and what do you call it, and what is it?
Well, I think this was one of the ones where I actually started with loose pieces and just started trying to create a composition. But even though I work in the square, my work contains a lot of curved forms, which stockings kind of lend themselves to curved forms too, because they are something that covers the body and the skin, and it's a curved form. So I like the contrast of the two, having the curved forms within the grid. It kind of happens organically, just experimenting with moving things around and figuring out what works best together. Sometimes I like to have a really strong contrast, like this piece with the two dark corners and the two lighter corners. But sometimes I like things to be softer and more subtle. And sometimes I actually use regular stockings. I do like to use colored stockings. These happen to be all-dimensional stockings. But sometimes I use solid stockings as well in different combinations. And I also like deforming the stockings in different ways. I actually intentionally run them. Actually, there's a few runs in this one. I burn them. I will layer them. I tie them, I twist them, I knot them. Anything I can think of to come up with a different look, a different feel, a different texture. And I really enjoy also creating some dimension in some of the works, and that's one of the things I've been playing with a lot lately. I may have a panel that recedes, or one that comes out to create some extra dimension, or knotting brings them up off of the surface. And I've done some recent works. In fact, some of the ones I did at the Hargett Center, where some of the stockings are actually hanging off of the work. Okay. They may be hanging down, they may be tied across. So I'm starting to play around a little bit with leaving that grid by having things fall off of the grid.
What can the viewers expect to see in this exhibit?
This particular exhibit is focusing entirely on the stocking pieces, I think with one exception, which was something new that I tried while I was at Hargett as well. I'm lucky that I have a brother who's in the textile business. He's director of quality control and facilities at a yarn plant where they make very specialized yarns. And so before I went to my residency, I called him up and I said, do you have anything there I can play with? You know, things that fall on the floor in the yarn making process or something. He said, no, we really don't, but we have product that we have received back from manufacturers that we supply with yarn that for whatever reason didn't meet their specs. The color wasn't quite right, or the physical properties weren't quite right. And he said, I can look through those warehouses and see if there's something there you might be able to play with. So he called me up and he said, we've got some bra strap material. And I thought, oh, okay. That might be fun. That might be a good complement to stockings. And fortunately, they weren't cut. So they were just links of bra strap material. And he sent me black and purple and pink. So I spent some time playing around with those and how to incorporate those into the stocking pieces. So you'll see one piece in the show that also includes bra strap material.
Okay, because I'm very curious to know how in the world did you incorporate that? And what I'm enjoying about my conversation with you is that you seem to have so much fun just taking bra strap material and trying to figure out how am I going to create this into this maybe perfect but not so perfect, because nothing is perfect, art form. So I'm just really curious to what sort of process, mind process did you go through in terms of trying to incorporate that into your
it was
art?
almost like a design school exercise. I go back often to that whole process that you learn.
A holistic approach.
Yes, in school. And I made a big board and took the bra strap material and a glue gun, hot glue gun.
Basic.
And just started playing with ways to weave them, ways to knot them, ways to loop them, ways to cut them at different lengths. You know, so I had this wonderful board of different textures and samples that I could start choosing from to incorporate into my work. And the piece that will be in the show is called Lingerie Play. It has 6 panels, 3 on each side of the stockings, and then in the middle is where I incorporated the bra strap material. And I actually looped them in alternating colors in pink and purple, all the way down the middle, and they actually hang down. So there's a middle section where the bra straps actually hang down below the grid.
So do you think sometimes you go back and draw on some of your very basic skills, for example, the glue gun, or just a very simple, clean palette and some grids and some squares, and then just start from that point to create?
Yes. And one of the things I loved about doing abstract work is I usually don't start with much of anything in mind. Like you said, the grid and maybe a color palette, but that's about it. Because I really enjoy watching what happens as I just get my hands in and do it. And I've found that as my art has progressed, what I really love more is the materiality of working with textiles. Unlike painting, which is, you know, you're just kind of removed from it and you're either recreating something, and whereas this, you're just right in there with it. You're tugging with it, you're burning it. I just love getting my hands into it and working with my hands.
And I just think it's exciting that you've been able to bring your education experience and the love of textiles into wonderful art. Where can we see your art? Because as I said before at the beginning of our interview, you have such an extensive resume. Where can people see your artwork other than the Block Gallery exhibit that is coming up in February?
Right. Locally, you can see my work at Treg Modern, which is in the Glenwood South Arts District, and at Flanders Gallery, which is
right
about
down
a block
the street.
from
That's
here.
Right. Yes.
And of course, you can come to my studio and visit me and see work in progress. And
Well, that's exciting. You're the second artist that's made an open invitation for people to come see the artist at work. What about your website? And
yes, I invite folks to visit my website. It's joycewatkinsking.30art.com. And I try to keep it up to date with my most recent work, which I call Hybrid Structures. But you can also see some of the other bodies of work.
well, I want to thank you for talking with us today about your artwork.
Thank you for having
we'll
me.
see you at the reception.
Yes.
All right, stay tuned. There's lots more to come.
Are you getting this, honey?
Oh, prime time. We are rolling.
All right, Mama's gonna bring it home. Mama's gonna bring it home.
Okay.
Come on, watch this guy.
Oh, backwards!
Oh, don't. Oh,
It went into Bob and Carol's yard. Oh, no? Okay,
Yeah.
here it comes.
oh, Mom!
Challenge your kids to be active and eat healthy.
All right, let's see what you can do. Let's go.
They might surprise you.
Let's go.
Search We Can for more ideas on how you and your kids can get healthy together.
Hello and welcome back to Block Gallery Interviews. This exhibit, Surface Matters, is very exciting and we want you to come out and be a part of it. Now to talk about her work of art and what she has in this particular exhibit is Stacy Bloom Rexroad. How are you and welcome?
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be
Thanks for being here. Great. Before the interview, we were just chatting about your work and you drew me in because you talked about your childhood experience. And for those of us who are watching you and for our viewers and those that will be coming to the exhibit, just give us a little bit of background about your experience and how you began to tap into your creative energy to create these wonderful works of floral art.
Absolutely. As you mentioned during the break, that the flower is, prominent throughout most of my work, and I just have early childhood memories. My father was in the service, and we lived in Germany when I was a young child, and they encouraged us to go on field trips and things when we lived there on the Army base, and so my father would take us on trips constantly, and one of my memories is being in Holland and just seeing acres and acres of tulips, and just like corn grows here in the United States, that was my experience with the tulips. And then, so that's kind of a happy memory for me. And then, unfortunately, when I was 10, my father passed away. And so, kind of the opposite experience with the flower was my memories of the funerary spreads. And probably one of the most potent memories is after the funeral, bringing all of the, funerary flowers back to my grandmother's home, and just that intoxicating smell of, almost hitting me in the face as a child, and that association. So for me, I was really, struck by the variations of memories and associations to the flower, and certainly throughout art history, it's often been used as a kind of feminine trope, and so I'm interested in that aspect of the flower also.
Well, now texture plays a very important role in this particular exhibit, Surface Matters. And when we talk about texture, we also talked about, again, my uneducated interpretation of your artwork. Beautiful, colorful, and the notes that I made to myself were that I saw lots of flowers, so very floral images, and they popped out because they look like 3D images. And you talk a lot about the importance of texture in your work. So can you share with us the process that you use for creating those beautiful floral designs?
Oh, thank you. Well, I guess really how even my current work came about was I started out as a painter, and so my color, I've moved, gradually into the sculpture field, but color has always stuck with me. I think that's my basis as a painter. But I'm always interested in blurring the lines throughout, different aspects of my work. And one of those is blurring the line between painting and sculpture. And so I do a lot of relief work. And so probably when I first started experimenting, I was using, a low craft item such as a silk flower, and presenting that in a traditional format of, the two-dimensional plane of a traditional painting. However, then I paint them layers and layers of enamel, and they take on a real sculptural form then.
What do you mean by relief work? Because, again, I'm an uneducated art enthusiast, so for those who may not understand what you mean when you say relief work, could you describe that for us?
Sure. It's I guess the easiest, if you go back to the Renaissance period, a lot of sculptors, if you notice on buildings, you'll see, kind of on the friezes, different details of horses and gladiators and things like that, where they come off of that two-dimensional surface, and they just create that bit of a shadow, and so that's a relief. And
so it almost looks 3D. I mean, very lifelike.
You can't walk around it, so it's not traditional sculpture in that sense that it's complete three-dimensional object, but it does present that sense of volume.
So very interestingly, when you talked about relief work and the process that you use to get the texture, the artists in this exhibit each talk about the process that they use to get to the work that they're creating. And you also use the word craft, and there's a lot of crafting going on in the artwork that is in this exhibit. So are you pulling something from perhaps your childhood or the early stages of your art to create your current works?
Absolutely. Like I had also mentioned during the break, is a lot of my work is about blurring lines, and definitely one of the lines I try to blur is that distinction between art and craft. And so I use a lot of what would typically be thought of as craft materials, or even household materials. And I have 2 daughters, so certainly the parental craft.
I bet that's fun for them. Oh, Mom, why don't we just use this?
Absolutely.
Do you get some of that?
Oh, they are constantly giving me feedback and encouraging me and pushing me in directions that I probably would never really think to do on my own. So one of my latest bodies of works is actually based on our household recycling bin. For a month we gathered all the plastics, and so I started to melt and form those into floral forms, and then stylized those in, again, in a traditional, what would be thought of as two-dimensional form of a Dutch master still life painting. But these forms kind of take on a blown glass type of effect, and they come off of the plane once again and spill out of the picture frame.
Wow, that sounds exciting. Well, before we talk about what you're currently doing, because you're currently in the MFA program at Greensboro, let's talk about some of the items that you will present in this particular exhibition.
Oh, sure. That piece that I was just speaking about, that's called Bring May Flowers, and so that's one of the pieces stylized after the Dutch masters. I also have some of the silk flower reliefs. Those are called Painted Gardens. And then I do present some of my paintings, which also still play with the surface in more in obscuring where I paint very flat painting, parts of the painting, where it really says, yes, this is a two-dimensional, form. And then presenting low craft items again, like with decoupage and things like that, and introduce that into the picture plane as well.
That is very interesting. So it sounds like you have a lot on your plate. You're creating art, and you're a mom, so you're raising 2 daughters, and you're in school. How do you find the time then to create for exhibits? Because that's juggling a lot, and it probably takes, how long would you say it took you to do the Dutch Masters piece?
That is really time intensive because first I form all the flowers, and I can usually make about 4 to 5 flowers an hour. So if I have a large block of time, then I can, produce quite a few. But probably for that particular piece, I'd say, it took a good 2 to 3 weeks of working pretty intently. Okay. But I have an incredible husband that is managing the kids and making sure they still get to go to tennis and activities, and I think he'll be happy when my graduation in May happens. So I think that'll be a nice break for him.
Good. Well, let's talk about that. You've decided to go back to school to get your master's in fine arts. What inspired you to do that, or what motivated you to do that?
Well, my husband actually works for Fidelity Investments, and so we were relocated down to North Carolina for that. And I was a former gallery director in Boston, and then was a general contractor in building houses and design work. So when we moved down here, I was kind of, okay, I can either try and build a clientele again with that, or I can do what I've always really wanted to do, and that's, be a maker of art again. And so I looked into the various schools, which there are amazing schools, in this area. And one of the artists I actually used to show in Boston said, I will write you a letter of recommendation, but only if you go and look at UNCG. And it's a bit of a hike from Chapel Hill where I live, but once I went out and I saw the facilities, I knew that was the place, and happily I was accepted into the program.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And so when I think about what you're currently doing, and when you talk about what you used to do professionally as a general contractor, how do you take that experience and weave it into your current work, which sort of has a very feminine message? Is flowers, you think of femininity. So interestingly enough, how do you find a way to weave that message or those images into your artwork?
I think that being a general contractor pushed my material use. I probably would have never ventured into using, odd, what are typically not thought of as traditional art materials had I not been a builder. And, I remember being on construction sites and just seeing that waste in the dumpster, and I would constantly pull things out and, try and reinterpret those things, and much to my husband's dismay, but a lot of that ended up in our home. So
would you say that incorporating items that can be reused or recycled sort of as a motivation for the feminine messages that you create in your artwork?
Absolutely. I'm really interested in feminism, and certainly, the 1970s groundbreakers, the feminist art movement. I'm not really interested in, rehashing what they have already, done so well, but there is more of a push for like ecofeminism per se, where mothers and daughters are interested in just leaving this place a better place for our children, and so I think a lot of my work stems from that kind of concept, where just bringing feminism in that manner.
And do you think that individuals, even women, I'm going to speak specifically to women, but do you think that women walk away with those type of feelings from looking at your artwork?
I'm hoping that
silently.
Right. I'm hoping, I think some viewers will not have that experience, but and that's why I'm not worried about presenting something that's perceived as beautiful. I'm fine. There was a big push of not making art that was beautiful for a very long time. But for that viewer that just wants to experience something that, you know, they find attractive, I am fine with that as well. But definitely, you know, I've done, they aren't in this particular show, but I've done other pieces that are much more socially, you know, I guess interested in social justice and women's issues, and so, you know, I do push it a little bit further often, but I'm also fine being an object maker as well. You know?
So do you find then that one of your purposes is to stem messages of feminism and eco-friendly thoughts about how we treat our environment, a mainstay in your artwork, you know, your present artwork and perhaps your future
Absolutely,
artwork?
Yeah. I guess I should speak about one of my recent shows was Art in Odd Places in Greensboro, and for that piece I did a interactive installation piece where I posted on Manila tags different facts regarding women's health and reproductive rights, and then I invited the audience to write their stories in regard to that. And I was invited to the show to participate through one of my professors, Cheryl Oring, and she does this type of social justice, you know, participatory installation work. And I have to say that I was so overwhelmed by the viewer response that now I feel like it just has to be a part of my work from here on out.
It sounds like you are actually, I won't say pushing the envelope, that's so, you know, that's so overused, an overused term, but that you are actually moving your artwork from, you know, a situation where people come and they look at it and they observe it and they think about it and they walk away and they may have conversation around, to pushing it so that people are actually having conversations and thinking about social issues, perhaps, which is. So, do you find that perhaps art is evolving that way with a lot of different people today?
I do think so. I think that, you know, there are certainly artists that do amazing work, you know, just making objects, which is a fabulous thing in and of itself. But I do think that there is a new, I can't say new, but a predominant, you know, message, usually a conceptual message that, you know, that's happening in today's art world.
In this particular exhibit, Surface Matters, you've mentioned a lot of the work that will be presented. I don't want to put you on the spot, but what is your most favorite piece that you will have on display?
I would have to say I'll be showing 2 of the recycled plastic pieces, and I would have to say those are, of course, they're my new pieces, so, you know, I'm excited about what direction that will take me in. But I'm definitely, I would choose those 2. Yeah.
So for folks that want to stay in touch with you and find out where you're going, where your work is being presented or exhibited, how can they follow you? Facebook, Twitter, email?
Both. Yeah, I do have a Facebook page, Stacy Bloom Rexroad. And then I also have a website, stacybloomrexroad.com. I do have my thesis show coming up in April at the Weatherspoon Art Museum in Greensboro, so I would invite everybody there. And in August, I have a show in Brooklyn, New York, and would invite everybody if they happen to be in New York. Yeah.
When is the event in Brooklyn, New York?
I'm not sure the dates on that yet. It will be the month of August sometime, and the gallery is South First. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Sounds like you are a very busy person, artist, student, wife, and mother. You are juggling a lot, and I can't wait to meet you at the reception.
Fantastic.
So, and to have an opportunity to look at your work live and in colors. I want to thank you for being with us on Block Gallery Interviews, and we'll see you at the Gallery Open.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
All right, thank you. Coming up next, case study artist Ross Ford.
Sit with me, imagine what you'd see if every child had a book to read.
So the mission is for us to get a book to each
Read to a child today and spark a lifetime of ambition.
Hello and welcome back to Block Gallery Interviews. This is the first in a series of interviews for our year, this year, 2014. And with me to talk about his wonderful installation is Ross Ford. Earlier I asked Ross if he was related to Harrison Ford. He said no, and neither is he related to Henry Ford, but I do want to welcome you. We're so excited about your installation of work because it is going to be the first in the case study. Mm-hmm. We were talking earlier about where you're from. You've been all over the United States, but just tell our viewing audience a little bit about you and who you are and how you got started.
My wife and I moved here to North Carolina about 3 years ago from Miami, Florida. Before that, I lived all over Pennsylvania, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, just a few.
Just a few places.
Yeah,
right.
So I got my starting as an artist in probably elementary school. I had always been a drawer. My grandfather was a commercial artist, and so he definitely guided my development early on. And then in about 8th grade, I was living in rural Minnesota, and I befriended an outsider artist, this guy named Dwayne Penske, who would meet with me and talk about art. And he's helped shape my understanding of what it is to be an artist and how an artist creates and develops ideas. And he instilled this idea of journaling for me and to keeping tracks of your thoughts and keeping tracks of your ideas, because you might have a great idea, but if you can't remember it later, it's not worth much. So he had a process where every day he would drive his car out into the field and draw until the sun went down. About afternoon, he had a job and he worked, I think, got out like 4 o'clock. So he had about 2 hours and he would drive out into the cornfields, and western Minnesota, there's lots of cornfields everywhere. And he would just draw and listen to music in his car, and that's how he kept track of his ideas. And then when he got home later at night in his studio, he would then develop those ideas a little further. And he did really involved sculptural work, cut a lot of things out of wood and painted them and assembled them together, which is very different than my work. And even the work at the time that I was doing, it was very different. But that process of looking at your ideas and really examining your ideas and keeping track of your ideas daily is something that has kept with me my whole life.
So let's talk a little bit about the process.
Yes.
and your work and how different it is. In your work, you describe it as an iterative process or iteration. Mm-hmm. And so explain to us what you mean by iteration.
Well, iteration is a word that is used in a couple different contexts. Mm-hmm. Most people aren't familiar with it, but what it means is repeating a process. Mm-hmm. It's not, repetition where you're creating something to be identical to the thing that you created before, but instead you're just replicating the process with the intention that the outcome is different than the one before. So instead of creating identical things, you're creating different things that are all different in more or less the same way.
Okay. I was telling you, or as we were talking earlier before the taping, I asked you if you started off as a sketch artist or to define or to share the difference. And you said, well, no, I'm not a sketch artist, but this is, through my development, I use this process to get to this. So in the case study, the examples of your work that we will see in that, how do you get from this particular piece mm-hmm. and how you created mm-hmm. to the end piece, if that makes sense?
Okay, well, primarily I'm known as a painter. And I do lots of preparatory drawings for each one of the paintings that I work on. And the paintings that I do are very labor intensive and take a long time to complete. So I spend a lot of time doing drawings in preparation for the painting and perfecting the shapes that I'm going to use and perfecting, the lines and the colors that I'm going to use. In the last couple of years, I've started doing drawings as finished work. With the intention that the drawing in itself is the finished work. And so I've developed that along the same way, but with a slightly different intention. These drawings are going to be a collection of drawings. Looking at the case, I have in my mind an idea about how it's all going to come together, but it's probably going to be realized once I get into the space and start actually putting things together. So we'll see exactly how the installation comes together. In my mind, I have an idea, but we'll see. But just back to my process, for each painting that I do thousands of drawings. And for these drawings that I've been doing as finished pieces, I'll do possibly hundreds of drawings before I get one that I really like. So what this installation is going to be collection of drawings, of which I've probably done 10,000 of so at this point, and I'm going to select the ones that I think work really good together. My process is two-part. The first part is just raw experimentation and raw this iterative process, trying to emote and express feelings and emotions. And then the second part is this analytical reflection piece, where I look at all the things that I've created and I start to make judgments about why I like them or whether I don't like them, and choosing the ones that go together and sorting them and sifting through them and then finding the things that work and identifying the things that don't work. So it's a two-part process. This installation is going to be a lot more of that second process. When my paintings, when people see the paintings, they really only see the finished product and they don't see all of the preparatory work that goes into it. And this installation is going to really show a lot of the preparatory work that goes into it, and hopefully people seeing it will understand sort of more of the process that goes into it.
I like that. Now, two things come to mind as you were speaking. One was, okay, you will be the first installation in case study, so you have to set the bar. I try to make you nervous, but you'll have to set the bar. And then the second thing I thought was, because he has so many pieces, how is he going to decide? And you've just shared that a little bit, that you will go through a process and you will select these pieces. Now, do you think you'll invoke some emotion in that as you're selecting these pieces?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, emotion and this intuitive sense is essential to the whole process. What I'm trying to do is document an internal process. It's an emotive, chaotic system that exists in all of our heads. And it's one of those things that is hard to define in words. And that's, I guess, why I'm drawn to visual art, is that it's the only way that really makes sense to explain it to me. But by measuring this process in a very controlled manner, I hope to show the shape of that internal chaotic system, which is internal thoughts and feelings and emotions. So something that actually I learned about relatively recently, and believe it or not, from Instagram. Someone who was following me on Instagram left a comment and said, you should check this out. And so I looked it up online, and I found the Wikipedia page, and then it unearthed this whole volume of work that I had been, I guess, aware of, but not really truly involved with. And that has given me a new framework to look at my own work. And the process is something called asemic writing, which means writing without specific semantic content. So making characters and figures that aren't necessarily words or verbal expressions, but instead are just raw expressions. And this is a process that dates back thousands of years. There were, monks in ancient China that practiced writing that had no meaning. And the Surrealists did a lot of what's called automatic drawing, which is a related process, and where you clear your mind and just draw whatever comes, and then try to make sense of it later. And that was a way of them generating fresh ideas and unexpected ideas. And in many ways, that process is related to what I do. It's not, I guess, exactly related, because my process has sort of evolved on its own without knowledge of this, but looking at this as a body of work and as a framework to look at things has proven very helpful and informative, I guess, over the last couple of months since I've been looking into it. So that's an area that I expect, I guess, to grow a little bit more in.
Very interesting and somewhat deep. Sounds like you study. You study people, you study art. And what I've learned is that most artists study someone's either motivated them, inspired them, nurtured them, and you shared some of that early on. You brought your sketchbooks, and we were looking at those, and you brought some smaller pieces. Now, is that where you start? The smaller pieces that you brought, you start from there.
Absolutely.
And then you allow that process to grow.
Absolutely.
when you're doing these pieces. Now, have you, in your mind, thought about the space? You know what the space in the case is like. I mean, I don't know what the dimensions are. So how many pieces will you fit? How many pieces will fit in that particular space?
It depends.
exhibit?
It depends. We'll see.
Is this some modular stuff again? Are you another artist that's doing modular installation?
No, I mean, I'm going to show up with probably several thousand drawings, and I'm going to have to see how they work with each other in the space. I have an idea about how I'm going to install them in the case, which will allow me to play with it and see what works best. If I end up doing very small drawings, it could be hundreds in there. If I use larger drawings, there will be fewer, but there will still probably be a lot. I've done a couple massive installations. I did an installation at Durham Art Guild, I think 2 years ago, where I had a wall of drawings that had over 7,000 drawings on it. It was 8 feet tall by, I think, 18 feet long. And they were little drawings about that big, evenly spaced in a grid.
How long did it take you to install that?
To install it, it didn't take that long. To draw it, it took a while. And I had it planned out, like with the schedule of the exhibition in mind. I said, you know, it's easy. I'll just do 2 sheets a day. I've got 3 weeks to prepare for it. And by the end of the first week of working on it, I was realizing that the physical toil on my hand was much greater than I expected. And I actually had to rest after each row of drawings and then after each page of drawings that I did. I definitely experienced pain in my hand and in my wrist that I have never experienced before in that process.
Wow. So then a lot of time goes into creating these drawings. Now, similarly, have you ever created an installation like the one you're going to create for case study in the art gallery?
I've done a few installations, but most of them, like the one at Durham Art Guild, was actually very ordered. There were specific pieces that were all the same size, and I had planned it out to fill that space exactly. This particular installation is going to be a little more chaotic. I have pieces of various sizes.
But managed chaos, right?
Well, it's all very controlled chaos. But chaos actually is an interesting concept.
Yes.
It means a pattern that's so large that you can't see it from where you're standing. It doesn't mean that it's not ordered. It just means that you, from where you're standing, can't see how it's all organized. And this will definitely be chaotic, but I'm going to be making, I think, drawings of different sizes, and I'm going to have to see how they fit together in the space. I've done a couple, I guess, dry runs in my studio to see how things will fit together, but it's going to take being in the space, I think, to see how it fully realizes. But I'm excited. It's been a while since I've worked on something that's been, I guess, this fluid and evolving in a while. Most of my work is very controlled. And if you're familiar with my paintings are very controlled.
Well, I'm glad that you're excited, because that was going to be my next question. Is this sounds like an opportunity for you to create something new and exciting and visually intriguing, perhaps chaotic, perhaps not, and for the viewer, they will, I guess, look at this and evoke from this raw emotion or maybe controlled emotion. What do you think?
Well, I think that each individual drawing is a moment of raw emotion, but my intention always with collecting large amounts of drawings is to show the underlying pattern, because I feel like the structures, in your brain that interpret language visually and interpret facial features and facial expressions, I believe that those are the same pieces of your brain that are, I guess, interpreting these abstract artworks. And so by arranging them all in a controlled manner, I hope that you see the similarities and the differences between them, and that this evokes that underlying chaotic system, and it brings light to the chaotic systems that are controlling that.
Well, I enjoy interviewing artists, because you guys all, some of the language is the same when you talk about process and emotion and visual art and it's like certain keywords, but what I find exciting is that each one of you brings your own personal experience and your emotion, education, expertise, and all that. And so when I listen, I'm always thinking, how would I interpret a piece? And when I looked at your drawings, it looked very free-flowing, you know, and you can see movement. And I'm not, trust me, I'm not an art critic. I enjoy art. I like looking at art. I love going to art museums. But when I look at your artwork, and that's why I asked you earlier if they were sketches, because it reminds me of just taking a pencil and just letting your hand just flow, and wherever the hand goes, that's the movement of that piece. And I would imagine, is that the kind of energy you bring to your acrylic once you get it from idea to actually doing the work
Yes
itself?
and no. I mean, the acrylic paintings that I do are sort of deceptive. They look very free-flowing, and they look like they flow very easily and quickly, but in process, they actually take many hours of like very careful work to accomplish. The drawings are more immediate. They either look perfect or they're not quite perfect. And so I have to do hundreds of them to find the ones that really stand out as being perfect. And it is sort of a free-flowing process. I definitely work in rhythms. I'll hit a streak where I'll do, you know, maybe 100 drawings, and in the middle somewhere, right around drawing 30 or 40, I'll hit a streak, and the next group of them will just all be A's, and they'll all just look great. And then after that, you know, maybe my hand gets tired, maybe my mind starts to wander or whatever, and they'll start to trail off, and then I'll stop, and I'll take a break and look at what I've done, sort of decide what was good and what was bad, and then maybe take a break, make another cup of coffee, and then go into the next session and take what I learned from that first session and try to create more pieces that are successful in the same way.
Wow, that sounds exciting. I mean, I'm just drawn into, I can even sit here and visualize you in your studio with, I don't know, sheets of paper, if that's what you're working on, and you're just drawing, and you look, and then you have an aha moment, and then that's the rhythm. You've reached the rhythm, and now the next, like you said, 30 pieces all are in tandem with maybe the first piece or the 10th piece, and that's just exciting.
Well,
it sounds exciting.
A lot of it has to do with observation and sorting, and a lot of people who aren't involved in art don't realize how much looking is involved in creating art. I'm always struck by images of artists in their studios, and one image in particular is a painter named Ad Reinhardt, who's probably most famous for doing paintings that are all black. And there is a shot of him in the studio sitting on a chair just staring into a 5-foot by 5-foot black canvas. And the look on his face is that he's been staring at that painting for hours. And there are similar photos of Mark Rothko, who also did big color fields, and he would just stare at the work for hours, waiting to see it talk to him, to see what it told him to do. And then he would get up and he would add more paint, or he'd add another color, or he would soften an edge, or, you know, and then sit back down and stare at it for hours and try to determine what it needed, or if it needed anything, or was it done, you know. And, you know, Rothko in particular would stare at the paintings, and he was looking for an intense emotional expression. He wanted to look at a color field and have an experience of joy, or, you know, an epiphany, or to induce tears. And people who look at his work in the museum, sometimes they do cry. Wow. And it's not a picture of anything. It's just a color and a field and a feeling that's captured by that color. And the size has something to do with it too. But so I spend a lot of time looking, and I'll just look at the drawing and try to figure out what works in it. Why does this one work? Why does the other one not work? And sometimes the answer is easy, you know. Sometimes the answer is very difficult and it's elusive, and I have to keep looking at it, and I'll go back. So that sorting and observation piece of it is very important, and it's often a piece that people looking at the finishing artwork, you know, the finished artwork, don't understand that went into it, and how many hours went into just looking at it.
Well, I can't wait to see your installation and case study, because when I stand there and look at it, I'm going to wonder, okay, how much time did he spend sorting? How much time did he spend sorting and stepping back and looking at and walking away for another cup of coffee and coming back? So I've actually enjoyed talking to you, and I could sit here and talk to you because obviously you love what you do, and I think that's important in your work, and just the movement and the emotion that you've put into it, and the emotion that you hope that viewers, those people that are going to look at your artwork, will bring out of it. Now, how can we find other pieces of your artwork?
Right now, locally, I'm just working out of my studio. I previously had a studio at Golden Belt in Durham, but after the birth of my son about 6 months ago, 7 months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. 7 months ago, I had to move my studio closer to home just because I needed to be closer to home. So right now I don't have a public studio in the area, and the only place that I'm showing at is actually a gallery in Mexico City. So the best way to view is to check my website, which is rossfordart.com, or to follow me on Instagram or on Tumblr. And on Instagram it's rossfordart, and on Tumblr it's also rossfordart.
Facebook or Twitter?
I have Facebook and Twitter, but I'm most active probably on Instagram and Tumblr.
Okay, well, we're excited to have your work as the first installation in case study.
I'm very excited too.
Your work will be the first installation case study. So you remember I said now, you got to set the bar, you know, but we're so excited to have you. And I want to thank you for being a part of this new series for 2014, Surface Matters. And I've actually enjoyed talking to you. And as I said before, we could probably talk for hours.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed flipping through your sketchbook and looking at all that you have to bring. And so we look forward to seeing you on February 6th at the reception.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Right, thank you. Surface Matters and Ross Ford's case study installation will be on display through March 21st. Please join us for the opening at the Block Gallery located at 222 West Hargett Street in downtown Raleigh on Thursday, February 6th from 5 to 7 p.m. So come, celebrate 30 years of art.